The first sound that ripped through Willow Creek that night wasn't thunder, it was a scream. Sharp, human, terrified. It sliced through the stillness of midnight, like glass through flesh, echoing down the cul-de-sac where porch lights usually meant safety. But not tonight. Tonight, every flickering bulb revealed a community paralyzed by the sound coming from my home, the one place that was supposed to protect my daughter. I wasn't there when it began. I was 3 hours away on an overnight drive for work, thinking I'd finally found peace for us, a quiet neighborhood, a fresh start, a home where my little girl could heal. But peace has a cruel way of turning into silence before disaster. My phone buzzed once, twice, then again, and when I saw my daughter's name flashing across the dashboard, something inside me froze. She never called after midnight. Ever. When I answered, I couldn't hear her words, only the sound of her screams. The static in her voice was drowned by chaos. Pounding footsteps, a door slamming, something breaking, and a woman's voice, muffled, harsh, demanding. I remember shouting her name over and over, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. Then, suddenly the line went dead. I pressed harder on the gas, the tires screeching against wet asphalt. It was raining, the kind of hard, punishing rain that makes the world blur. My GPS said I was hours away, but every second felt like a lifetime. I called the police with shaking hands, my voice breaking as I tried to form words. My house, someone's inside. My daughter's home alone. Please send someone now. Back on Maplewood Lane, my neighbors later told me the scene was something out of a nightmare. Mrs. Klein from across the street said she heard a crash like thunder, followed by a young girl's voice screaming for help. Another neighbor, Tom, peeked through his blinds but froze when he saw a shadowy figure at my front door, a woman in a robe, her blonde hair sticking to her face in the rain, holding something metallic in her hand. He thought it was a flashlight. Later, police would confirm it wasn't. The porch light above my front door flickered violently, throwing bursts of white light over the wet pavement. Every time it flashed, it revealed more of the horror. The front door slightly ajar, the welcome mat twisted, muddy footprints leading inside. Then came the sound, a guttural yell, followed by a crash of something heavy. Then silence. When the first patrol car pulled up, the officer stepped out into the storm with his flashlight raised. He found the door forced open. The lock had been splintered clean off. Inside, the air was thick, heavy with fear, and the faint scent of something chemical. The living room was in disarray. Cushions torn, the lamp shattered, drawers pulled out as if someone had been searching for something. And then he heard it, a soft whimper from the hallway. He followed the sound until he reached my daughter's room. The door was half open, her wheelchair knocked to the floor. She was crouched behind her bed, clutching her medical alert device in her trembling hands. Her eyes were wide, glassy, unblinking. When he asked what happened, she couldn't speak, only pointed toward the open window. The curtain was flapping in the wind, rain pouring through, and muddy footprints led both in and out. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the house was surrounded by flashing red and blue lights. Police tape fluttered under the rain like a warning I never saw coming. I jumped out before the car even stopped, slipping in the mud, running toward the front steps where an officer blocked my way. "Sir, please, you can't go in there," he said, but I shoved past him. I needed to see her. I needed to make sure she was alive. Inside, time slowed. My boots hit the soaked carpet, each step heavier than the last. The house I had spent months building into a home now looked like a war zone. I followed the trail of muddy footprints until I saw her, my daughter, wrapped in a police blanket, her face pale, but alive. When she saw me, she burst into tears, and I fell to my knees, holding her tighter than ever before. She kept whispering one name over and over again. Not a stranger's, not a thief's, Karen. At first, I didn't believe it. Karen, the HOA president, the woman who lived 2 houses down, the one who lectured me about keeping our neighborhood standards and complained about the ramp I built for my daughter's wheelchair. How could she be the one inside my home at midnight? But the officers found something near the broken window that ended all doubt, a golden HOA badge keychain with her initials engraved. The officer looked at me with a face that said more than words could. "We've got a name," he said quietly. Outside, neighbors huddled under umbrellas, whispering, their faces pale in the flashing lights. The sound of my daughter's screams still lingered in their minds, the kind of sound that doesn't fade with the rain. As the ambulance doors closed and the sirens faded into the night, I stood there under the porch light, the same light that once welcomed us home, now flickering weakly over the shattered doorway. The storm had finally begun to ease, but the silence it left behind felt worse than the thunder. Somewhere out there, she was still free, and my daughter, trembling in the back of that ambulance, would never sleep through the night again. That was the moment I swore, whatever it took, whatever I had to become, I'd make sure Karen never set foot on another family's porch again, because no parent should ever have to hear their child's screams echo through the phone, knowing they weren't there to stop it. That morning had been perfect, the kind that makes you believe bad things only happen to other people, the kind that makes you forget the world can turn cruel in a heartbeat. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, the smell of cinnamon pancakes filled the air, and my daughter, Lily, sat by the table in her wheelchair, humming to herself as she buttered her toast with more determination than skill. She was born with a neurological condition that made walking painful, but she never once complained. "Dad," she said, grinning as she struggled with a knife, "when I grow up, I'm going to have a bakery with ramps everywhere. Karen can't stop me from selling cookies, right?" She giggled, proud of her own defiance. I laughed too. If only I had known how prophetic her words would become. We lived in a quiet corner of Willow Creek, a place where the lawns were sharp enough to cut your fingers, and the HOA board believed God himself signed their rulebook. I'd moved there for peace. After Lily's mother passed away, I wanted her to have somewhere safe, somewhere steady. The community brochure had promised family values, safety, and order. It didn't mention the cost of that order, the eyes that watched from behind curtains, the whispers that traveled faster than the mail. That morning, though, it all felt good. Lily's laughter made the house alive again. She loved music, especially piano, and after breakfast, she rolled herself toward the living room to practice. I listened from the kitchen as her small hands played the same soft melody she'd been working on for weeks. The notes drifted like sunlight through the walls. I remember standing there, coffee in hand, feeling proud. Proud that despite everything, she still found joy. That despite the stares and the comments, she'd grown into someone who saw beauty where others saw pity. I had a work trip that day, just one night away. My boss had promised it was quick routine. I told Lily I'd be back by morning, and she gave me her usual lecture: don't eat gas station food, don't drive too fast, and text me when you reach the hotel. She said it like a mother, not a 12-year-old girl. I promised. I always promised. Before leaving, I double-checked every window, every lock, and made sure her emergency contacts were on the fridge, not because I didn't trust the neighborhood, but because of her, Karen. Even then, she'd been hovering, the self-appointed queen of the HOA. She didn't like Lily's wheelchair ramp because it lowered curb appeal. She didn't like the wind chimes because they were too sentimental. She even sent us a notice once claiming our security camera violated privacy guidelines. I'd ignored it, but the truth is, she made my skin crawl in ways I couldn't explain. That afternoon, I saw her standing across the street as I packed my car. She had her usual clipboard in hand, her lips pursed in disapproval. When she saw me, she offered a tight, polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Out for work again, Mr. Carson?" she asked. "Yes, just overnight. Lily's babysitter will check in," I replied, trying to sound casual. She nodded slowly, her gaze flicking toward my daughter's window. "It's brave, leaving her alone. This neighborhood can be unpredictable." Her words hung in the air, coated with that thin layer of passive aggression she was known for. I brushed it off, forced a smile, and drove away. But even as I left, I couldn't shake the image of her standing there under the sycamore tree, eyes following my car until it disappeared. On the road, I called Lily twice just to make sure she was okay. Each time, she sounded cheerful. "I'm fine, Dad," she said, laughing. "Stop worrying." I locked the doors, and Mr. Jenkins next door said he'd keep an eye out. Go work, so you can bring me something from the hotel gift shop. She sounded happy. Safe. That evening, I texted her before bed. She sent me a photo of the family dog, Max, asleep on her lap with the caption, "Security detail on duty." I smiled. I told her good night, that I loved her, and that I'd see her in the morning. Then came midnight. The neighbors would later say they saw Karen's porch light still on long after everyone else went to bed. She'd been pacing her front yard, muttering to herself something about violations and property standards. Back in my hotel room, I woke once to the sound of thunder, rolled over, and checked my phone. No messages. I smiled faintly, believing everything was fine. But sometimes evil doesn't knock. Sometimes it waits for you to leave, to trust that locks and neighborhood watch signs mean safety. That night, while rain began to fall and the world outside went quiet, someone crossed the street under the flickering street lamp. Someone in a hood. Someone carrying something metallic that glinted in the stormlight. And inside that little white house at the end of the lane, my daughter, my brave, gentle girl, had no idea that the calm she felt would be the last she'd ever know. Every tragedy begins with a moment of peace and the lie that it will last forever. If you asked anyone in Willow Creek who ran the neighborhood, they'd say the mayor. But the truth was simpler and far more terrifying. Karen ran it. She didn't have an official badge, though she wore her authority like one. The HOA president, self-proclaimed guardian of neighborhood standards. Her power came not from law, but from fear, the kind that silences good people, because confronting her wasn't worth the trouble. From the day Lily and I moved in, she made her presence known. She showed up the morning after we unloaded our boxes, clipboard in hand, a brittle smile on her face. "Welcome to Willow Creek," she said. "We take pride in keeping things orderly here." Her eyes didn't look at me when she said it. They drifted past me toward the new wheelchair ramp I'd installed for Lily. I explained, kindly at first, that my daughter couldn't climb stairs, that the ramp was non-negotiable. She nodded slowly, her smile tightening like a noose. "I see. Well, we'll have to review that in our HOA guidelines. You understand, right? Uniformity matters." Uniformity. That was her religion. Every lawn trimmed to 2 inches. Every fence painted the same color. Every family expected to smile on command. But beneath that order lurked a quiet ugliness, one that fed on control. At first, I dismissed her as eccentric, the kind of person who cared too much about appearances. But small things began to happen. Our mailbox was vandalized twice. Trash cans mysteriously overturned the night before inspections. HOA violation notices began appearing on our door. Unauthorized structure, non-compliant fixture, property eyesore. The unauthorized structure, of course, was Lily's ramp. Lily didn't understand why she was being singled out. "Doesn't she like me, Dad?" she asked one evening as we watered the little garden she'd planted. "Maybe I should bake her cookies." That was Lily, pure heart, untouched by bitterness. She believed everyone could be fixed with kindness. I wanted to believe that, too. So I tried. I brought Karen coffee one morning, hoping to ease the tension. She accepted it, barely looking at me, and said, "I appreciate your effort, but rules are rules." Then she looked me in the eye and added, "Sometimes exceptions make a neighborhood weaker. You wouldn't want that, would you?" Her words were sharp, deliberate, the kind that left splinters. After that, she began watching us. Not overtly at first, just little glimpses, her blinds shifting when we came home, her shadow lingering by the fence at dusk. Then came the comments. She'd stop Lily on her way to the mailbox and say things like, "You're such a brave little girl, getting around all by yourself. I just worry you might roll into the street." When Lily told me, I confronted her. Calmly at first, I told her to stop talking to my daughter. She laughed, that brittle, echoing laugh that always meant trouble. "I was just being neighborly," she said. "If you can't handle a little concern, maybe this neighborhood isn't the right fit for you." I walked away before I said something I couldn't take back. But that night, someone left a note taped to our door. Printed, not handwritten. "Neighborhood harmony requires cooperation. Some people need to learn their place. The next morning, our security camera footage was gone, wiped clean. I replaced the system and installed a backup. I even showed the footage to Officer Barnes at the local precinct. He shrugged and said, "Without proof, there's not much we can do. She's just a neighbor being difficult." But I knew better. Karen's type doesn't stop until they get what they want, and what she wanted was control. The following week, she held an HOA meeting. I didn't attend, but word got around. She proposed new rules, stricter ones. No exterior modifications without board approval. No ramps or additions that alter visual uniformity. My house was the example she used on the slideshow. When I heard, something inside me snapped. I stormed over the next day, not to argue, but to make her understand what she was doing. I knocked on her door. No answer. I was about to leave when I heard movement inside. Then, through the frosted glass panel, her silhouette appeared. She didn't open the door. She just stood there, perfectly still, watching. "I'm done with your harassment," I said, my voice shaking with controlled rage. "You go near my daughter again and I'll go to court. Do you understand me?" There's a long pause. Then, slowly, her hand rose behind the glass. She pressed her palm against it, flat, deliberate, and said, "Be careful who you threaten. I have ways of handling problems." Then she turned off the porch light, leaving me in darkness. From that night on, the neighborhood grew quieter around us. People avoided eye contact. Kids stopped visiting Lily's house. The community that once waved every morning now pretended not to see us. Karen's shadow had stretched over every lawn. Still, I told myself it was fine, that she'd get bored and move on. I didn't realize she wasn't just watching, she was waiting for the perfect moment. And that moment would come the night I wasn't home. Monsters don't always hide in forests. Sometimes they live across the fence, smiling through the cracks. The weeks that followed blurred together, a cycle of tension, warnings, and sleepless nights. I kept telling myself that Karen would eventually back off, that the HOA board or the police would step in and rein her in. But the truth was simple and sickening. No one wanted to cross her. In Willow Creek, Karen wasn't just a neighbor, she was the system. The first real threat came on a Monday morning. I was leaving for work when I noticed a fresh notice taped to my garage door. Unlike her usual formal violation slips, this one wasn't printed on HOA letterhead. It was handwritten, scrawled in red ink. "Remove the ramp or I will." The words were uneven, jagged, and the ink had bled slightly from moisture. At first, I thought it was a prank, but when I looked closer, I saw the faint imprint of a high heel in the damp mulch near my walkway. Size small, the kind Karen always wore. I reported it immediately to the HOA board. They promised to review the concern internally. That was their favorite phrase. It meant ignore it quietly. A week later, I received another letter, this time claiming my ramp violated neighborhood safety standards. No one else in the neighborhood had received a single violation that month. That evening, I stood outside staring at my home, the ramp, the garden, the wind chimes, all simple things that made Lily happy. And yet, to someone like Karen, they were signs of rebellion. Inside, Lily was on the couch, sketching something in her notebook. "Dad," she said, "I drew a picture of our house. I even put Karen's roses in it, so she won't be mad." Her innocence broke me. She was trying to make peace with a woman who didn't believe she deserved to live there at all. I tried to keep things normal, keep Lily focused on school, piano, her art. But strange things kept happening. Our mail began disappearing. Someone turned off our outdoor lights at night. And one morning, Lily's wheelchair tires were deflated, all four perfectly punctured. The police called it vandalism without clear suspect. I called it a warning. When I confronted Karen directly, she denied everything, of course. "You really think I have time to play with your tires?" she said, smiling faintly. "Maybe if you stopped blaming people, you'd fit in better around here." Then she leaned closer and whispered, "People who don't follow rules tend to attract trouble." I told her to stay away from my property. She only smirked. "I'm the HOA president," she said calmly. This entire neighborhood is my property. I walked away shaking. My patience was gone. I called Officer Barnes again, explaining the pattern, the threats, the damage, the harassment. He sighed through the phone. I understand, Mr. Carson, but without a clear witness or video evidence, it's just your word against hers. Try documenting everything. Documenting everything, that became my new obsession. I installed extra cameras, hidden ones this time, and set up a motion sensor alarm near the front door. Every night, before going to bed, I checked the feed. Nothing. For 2 weeks, it was quiet. Too quiet. Then, one evening, while reviewing footage, I saw her. Karen. It was around 11:47 p.m. She was standing at the edge of our lawn, just beyond the camera's audio range, holding something, a clipboard. Maybe. She didn't move. She just stood there, staring at the house for over 6 minutes. Then she stepped forward, touched the ramp rail, and whispered something I couldn't hear. Finally, she walked away. That was the moment my fear turned into dread. It wasn't just petty harassment anymore, it was fixation. The next morning, I printed the still images and took them straight to the police station. Barnes looked at them, his brow furrowing. This is odd, he admitted, but standing on your lawn isn't technically breaking the law. Not breaking the law? I snapped. She's stalking us. He lowered his voice. Mr. Carson, please, I understand, but legally, I interrupted. What happens when she stops standing outside and starts coming inside? He didn't have an answer. That night, I told Lily to keep her door locked. She nodded, trying to hide her fear. She was strong, stronger than she should have had to be. She asked if we could move. I told her soon. I was already planning it. Just one more week until my next paycheck cleared, and I'd have enough for a new deposit somewhere far away from Willow Creek. I never got that chance. Because that week, the warnings turned personal. When I came home from work one evening, there was a note on my windshield. Same red ink. Same handwriting. You don't deserve to live here. She doesn't belong. I stared at it for a long time, my pulse pounding. My daughter, didn't belong. I should have taken Lily and left that night. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But I told myself I was overreacting, that maybe this was just another bluff. After all, what kind of person would really follow through with a threat like that? I didn't know then that Karen wasn't bluffing. She was waiting for me to be gone just long enough, waiting for the right night, waiting for the storm. And when it came, she would step across that line she'd been dancing on for months, from obsession into something far darker. Every threat feels empty until the moment it's carried out, and by then it's far too late to listen. The night it happened, the rain came early, the kind that starts as a whisper and ends as a roar. Lightning flashed over the roofs of Willow Creek, and somewhere between the thunderclaps, a clock struck midnight. By then, I was already 200 miles away, stuck in a motel off 84, staring at the ceiling and trying to convince myself my daughter was safe. I had texted her an hour before. Everything good, kiddo? She replied with a picture of Max curled up beside her, the caption, All good, Dad. Love you. It was the last text she sent before everything went wrong. Back home, the storm knocked out half the streetlights. The neighborhood fell into a patchwork of shadows. Karen's house, 2 doors down, was one of the few still lit, a pale glow seeping through her curtains. Cameras later showed her stepping outside in a raincoat, holding a flashlight, and what looked like a clipboard. To anyone watching, she might have looked like a concerned neighbor checking for damage. But she wasn't checking on anyone. She was hunting. Lily was asleep on the couch, the TV still humming softly, when she heard the first noise, a scraping sound against the front door, faint at first, then sharper, more deliberate. She thought maybe the wind had blown something loose. Then came the knock. Not a polite one. Heavy, impatient, deliberate. Who's there? She called out, her voice trembling. No answer. Max the dog growled low, ears pinned back. Then another knock, louder this time, followed by the unmistakable sound of the handle turning. She grabbed her phone, her hands shaking, and called me. I still remember the sound of that call, her breath ragged, the storm hissing in the background. Dad, "Someone's at the door," she whispered. "They're not leaving. Lock yourself in your room." I told her, already out of bed, pulling on my jacket. "Call 911 right now." "I'm scared," she cried. Then I heard it, the crash of wood splintering, the door bursting open, and a woman's voice sharp and cold. "You're breaking the rules. You don't belong here." Then came her scream, the kind that shatters everything you thought was safe. I shouted her name through the phone, but the line went dead. I ran. I didn't think. I didn't breathe. I just drove. My car tore through the storm, headlights cutting through the sheets of rain. Every mile between us felt like a lifetime. I called the police, my voice shaking, barely coherent. "My daughter's home alone. Someone's in the house. Please, just send everyone you've got." Back on Maplewood Lane, Officer Daniels was the first to arrive. He found the front door hanging from its hinges, rain pouring into the foyer. "Police," he yelled, stepping inside. The air smelled like bleach and wet carpet. A lamp was smashed, the ramp outside overturned. Then he heard it, faint sobbing from the hallway. He followed it, gun drawn, until he found Lily in the corner of her bedroom, her face streaked with tears. She was clutching her service dog's collar, trembling. The dog whimpered beside her, bleeding from a shallow cut on its side, probably from broken glass. "Where is she?" the officer asked. Lily could barely speak. She broke in. She said I was violating rules. She tried to take down the ramp. The officer turned toward the sound of movement coming from the kitchen. He shouted again, "Police, show yourself." But by the time backup arrived, the back door was open, swinging in the wind. Whoever had been there is gone. When I finally reached the house, red and blue lights reflected off every puddle. I ran straight past the tape, past the officers, straight to Lily. She threw her arms around me, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. I held her, trying to steady my voice. "You're safe now, baby. I've got you. You're safe." But I didn't feel safe. The house felt poisoned, every corner heavy with the presence of someone who should never have been there. One of the officers walked over holding a soaked object in a plastic evidence bag. "We found this outside the back door," he said. It was a gold HOA keychain with a small flashlight attached, engraved initials, K. D. Karen Dawson. The name hit me like a blow. Neighbors began to gather under umbrellas, whispering. Some of them looked guilty, others scared. Mrs. Klein said she'd seen Karen walking down the street earlier that night, muttering about enforcing standards and removing hazards. No one thought to call the police, because in Willow Creek, Karen's behavior wasn't strange anymore. It was normal. As dawn broke, officers finished photographing the scene. The ramp was half torn, the living room destroyed, and muddy footprints led from the kitchen to the backyard fence, straight toward Karen's property. Detective Barnes arrived just as the rain eased. He looked at me, his face grim. "We'll get her," he said quietly, "but I need you to understand, this isn't just vandalism anymore. This was a break-in with intent. Intent. That word sank deep into my chest. Lily sat wrapped in a blanket in the back of the ambulance, staring at the broken door. She said she wanted to fix the neighborhood, she whispered to me later. She said rules were rules. The officer next to us muttered, under his breath, "You don't fix a neighborhood by breaking into a child's home." When the ambulance pulled away, I stood in the driveway as the last of the rain faded into mist. The porch light flickered weakly above the door, the same one that had witnessed everything, that had bathed her screams in its cold white glow. I realized then that this wasn't just an invasion of my house. It was an invasion of everything I believed in: safety, community, decency. Karen had crossed the line from obsession into madness. And I knew, as I watched the police cars disappear into the fog, that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Some monsters don't come from the dark. They bring their own light and use it to blind everyone until it's too late to see what they've done. The sky was still bruised from the storm when the sun began to rise, faint light pushing through the mist that hung low over Willow Creek. The flashing red and blue lights from the patrol cars painted the wet pavement in colors that didn't belong to mornings, colors of panic, of aftermath, of something broken that would never quite heal. I stood on the porch, soaked and shaking, staring at the splintered door that once meant home. Every creak, every gust of wind through the broken frame sounded like her scream replaying in my ears. Inside, the house was unrecognizable. The rug was flipped, the pictures shattered, the ramp that gave Lily her independence twisted and half-ripped from its bolts. It looked less like a home and more like a warning. Lily sat inside the ambulance, her small frame wrapped in a gray blanket. She hadn't said much since the night before. She just kept holding Max, her fingers tangled in his fur, as if letting go would make everything real again. The paramedic kept his voice gentle. "She's in shock, sir. Physically, she's fine. But she's shaken." Shaken. That word felt too small for what she'd been through. When the detective came back with a clipboard, his tone was careful, the kind of voice people use when they're afraid the truth might break you. "We've got a team checking Karen Dawson's house. No sign of her yet. Her car's gone. But we've got patrol units out. We'll find her." I nodded numbly. I wasn't sure I believed him. I wasn't sure I believed anything anymore. The neighborhood that once felt peaceful now looked like a crime scene, people peeking from behind blinds, whispering to each other, pretending to be shocked when deep down they knew this was only a matter of time. Every person there had ignored her threats, her bullying, her so-called rules. They'd all said, "That's just Karen being Karen." Now, they couldn't even look me in the eye. Mrs. Klein, the elderly woman who lived across the street, shuffled over with tears in her eyes. I saw her out last night," she stammered. "She was carrying something heavy, like a hammer or crowbar. I should have called you. I should have said something." I wanted to be angry, but all I could do was stare at her. Because she was right. Everyone should have said something, including me. By noon, officers were canvassing door to door. Reporters began showing up, microphones, cameras, vans. They called it an incident of HOA, harassment gone too far. I wanted to tell them this wasn't about harassment. It was about hate, the kind that hides behind rules and meetings and fine print. Detective Barnes pulled me aside. "We found something you should see," he said. He led me into Karen's backyard. Her garden was immaculate, every hedge trimmed, every flower in its place. But behind her shed, they'd uncovered a small pile of boxes covered with plastic. Inside were photos, dozens of them, of my house, my car, my daughter. Some taken at night. "She'd been watching you for months," Barnes said, quietly. "This was planned." I felt my chest tighten until I couldn't breathe. Planned. She'd studied us like an enemy, waiting for the moment I was gone. Later that evening, Lily finally spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Dad," she looked different. Her eyes were empty. She stared at her hands. She kept saying I was a problem, that I was making the neighborhood ugly. I knelt beside her, holding her face in my hands. "You are not a problem, baby. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." She started crying, quiet, broken sobs that made my heart crumble all over again. Why would she hate me for being different? I didn't have an answer, because the truth was too cruel. People like Karen didn't need reasons. They needed control. And when they couldn't control the world, they tried to destroy whatever didn't fit inside it. That night, I sat by her bedside, unable to sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the windows made my pulse spike. I kept replaying the moment I heard her scream through the phone, that helpless feeling of being too far away. Sometime after midnight, I stepped outside. The rain had stopped. The air was still, heavy with silence. Across the street, Karen's porch light was still on, glowing faintly through the fog. Police had left it untouched during their search. It flickered once, twice, then went out. For the first time since the invasion, I felt a strange calm. The kind that comes when fear burns itself out and turns into something colder, resolve. When I went back inside, Lily was asleep, her hand resting on Max's fur. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "I promise you this isn't over. She's not getting away with this." The next morning, as the first true light of dawn filled our living room, I sat down with a cup of untouched coffee and stared at the wreckage, the broken ramp, the splintered door. The framed photo of us smiling on her first day of middle school cracked down the middle. That was the moment I decided something inside me was done being afraid. This wasn't just a crime scene anymore. This was war. And if the system wouldn't stop her, I would. Grief doesn't end when the sun rises. It just hardens into something that no storm can wash away. It began 3 days after the break-in, the calm after the chaos, when silence felt heavier than any scream. The news vans lined the street, their antennas reaching into the cloudy sky like fingers hungry for headlines. My house, once a private place of love and laughter, was now a spectacle. Every anchor repeated the same words in dramatic tones. Local HOA president under investigation after breaking into a neighbor's home, assaulting a disabled minor. I hated hearing Lily's name followed by the word victim. Detective Barnes had kept his word. Karen Dawson was found 2 towns away, hiding in a motel off the interstate. She dyed her hair, changed her plates, and was carrying fake HOA documents claiming authority of community enforcement. The police said she hadn't planned to run for long. She wanted to make her case public. Her case. I sat in the courthouse watching her walk in, handcuffed, chin high, lips tight, as if she still believed she was the hero of her story. She didn't look at me. Not once. But when her eyes passed over Lily sitting beside me in her wheelchair, I saw a flicker, not remorse, not guilt, but irritation, like Lily's presence still offended her. The courtroom was tense. Residents of Willow Creek filled the benches, whispering among themselves. Some were there out of guilt, others out of curiosity. A few were probably still loyal to her, people she'd manipulated for years, the ones who thought rules keep order. The prosecutor presented the evidence one piece at a time: the surveillance footage of Karen trespassing weeks before the incident, the threatening letters, the photographs she'd taken of her home. Then came the audio clip from a neighbor's security camera, faint but unmistakable Lily screams, followed by Karen's voice shouting, "You don't belong here." I felt Lily's hand tremble in mine. When the defense lawyer stood up, he tried to spin the story, painting Karen as mentally unwell, claiming she acted out of community duty gone wrong. He even hinted that I had provoked tension by ignoring HOA regulations. That was when I stood. The judge warned me to remain silent, but I couldn't sit there and listen anymore. My voice cracked through the courtroom. She terrorized my daughter because of a wheelchair ramp, because we didn't fit her perfect picture. Gasps filled the room. The judge ordered quiet, but the truth was out, raw, undeniable, and echoing in every corner of that courthouse. Over the next few weeks, the story spread beyond Willow Creek. National outlets picked it up. The HOA community boards went into meltdown. Thousands of people online started sharing similar stories. Families bullied, fined, or threatened by power-hungry HOA leaders who thought the law bent for them. Karen became the face of something bigger, a symbol of how cruelty can hide behind authority. But for me, it was never about symbols. It was about justice for my daughter. When the verdict came down, the courtroom was silent. Guilty on all counts: breaking and entering, assault, child endangerment, and harassment. She showed no emotion, just that same blank, self-righteous stare. Lily leaned against me, whispering, "Is it over now?" I squeezed her hand. Almost. Afterward, outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded us. Microphones pressed close. "What do you want people to take away from this?" one asked. I looked into the camera and said, "This isn't just about my daughter. It's about every family too afraid to stand up to abuse disguised as order. Rules should protect, not destroy." That clip went viral overnight. Within a week, lawmakers in the county announced plans to audit HOA policies. A few neighboring communities disbanded their boards entirely. Others replaced their leadership with people who actually believed in compassion. But not everyone celebrated. Some neighbors avoided us entirely. Others still whispered that I'd brought too much attention. They didn't understand. I didn't want attention. I wanted peace. Lily began therapy, slowly learning to sleep without the light on. Sometimes she still woke in the middle of the night, clutching Max, tears streaking down her face. But there was a new strength in her, quiet, steady, and unshakable. One afternoon, she rolled out to the porch where I was repairing the ramp. "Dad," she said softly, "can we paint it?" I smiled. "Any color you want." She chose sky blue, the color of freedom. That evening, I got a letter from one of the jurors. It said, "Your daughter reminded me why I joined the police academy. Justice only exists when people like her refuse to disappear." I kept that letter framed on my desk because it reminded me that justice isn't a verdict, it's a ripple. Karen was sentenced to 10 years. Some said it wasn't enough. Maybe they were right. But I realized justice doesn't always come from punishment. Sometimes it comes from what you build after the storm. As I watched Lily laugh while painting the ramp, I understood something simple and profound. We had survived her darkness. And in surviving, we had already won. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about making sure no one else ever has to scream under someone else's porch light again. 6 months passed, yet the memory of that night still echoed in the corners of my mind, not like a wound anymore, but like a scar that refuses to fade. The kind that doesn't hurt when you touch it, but reminds you every day that something once tried to destroy you and failed. Willow Creek had changed. The tidy lawns and neatly trimmed hedges looked the same, but there was a new quiet in the air. Not the polite silence of neighbors pretending, but the thoughtful calm of people learning to live differently. For the first time in years, folks waved at one another without suspicion. The HOA office stood empty, its doors boarded up, a for sale sign nailed to the front. The community that once worshipped control had finally chosen freedom. Every morning, Lily and I sat on the front porch together. She'd feed Max treats while I sipped my coffee, the same ramp, now painted a bright, hopeful blue, glowing under the sunlight. It was her idea to call it the Skyway. She said, "It reminds me that I can always reach the sky, even when my feet can't." She was healing. Slowly, beautifully. The nightmares had become less frequent, the trembling less visible. She'd started writing again, poems, short stories, sometimes letters she never sent. Her therapist called it reclaiming her voice. I called it courage. The local news came by one afternoon to film a follow-up. The reporter asked me if I felt justice had been served. I thought for a long moment before answering. Justice, I said, isn't just about one person going to prison. It's about the world learning something from it. About people realizing that rules without compassion are just cages. That line spread across social media. Before I knew it, my inbox filled with letters, families from all over the country who'd been bullied or fined or humiliated by their own HOAs. Parents who had kids with disabilities and were told their ramps, fences, or medical setups didn't fit community standards. One mother wrote, "Your daughter gave me the courage to fight back. We're keeping our ramp, no matter what they say." It was then I knew our pain had become something larger, a movement. Lily started speaking at schools with me, shyly at first. She told kids, "You don't have to be loud to be brave." Every time she spoke, you could feel the room shift, the kind of silence that happens when truth hits something deep inside people. We partnered with a nonprofit to advocate for accessibility and HOA reform laws. And though the process was slow, it was happening. Policies were changing, people were listening. Even the mayor reached out, asking if we'd join a community advisory board. I didn't recognize my life anymore, not because it was broken, but because it was bigger than I'd ever imagined it could be. Still, there were days when the past tried to crawl back in. Sometimes I'd catch the faint scent of rain and would, the same smell from that night, and my chest would tighten. But then I'd hear Lily laughing in the living room, her voice filling the same walls that once echoed with fear, and the darkness would retreat again. One evening, near sunset, Lily and I walked and rolled down to the lake at the edge of the neighborhood. The sky was turning gold and pink, reflections rippling across the water like fire on glass. She looked up at me and asked, "Dad, do you think she ever feels sorry?" I took a long breath. Maybe, but that's not our burden to carry anymore. Lily smiled, a soft, steady smile that told me she understood. Then we're free, she said. We stood there in silence as the sun dipped behind the trees. I realized something profound. Peace isn't the absence of memory. It's the decision to live fully despite it. When we returned home, the porch light flickered on automatically the same one that once shone over chaos. I stared at it for a long time. That light had seen fear, blood, and brokenness. But now it stood for something else entirely: resilience. The kind that refuses to be extinguished no matter how dark the night once was. I turned to Lily. You know, I said quietly, that light used to remind me of everything we lost. She smiled up at it. Now it reminds me we survived. And she was right. Because survival isn't just staying alive, it's reclaiming your story. It's taking the same house where screams once echoed and filling it with laughter until the walls forget the sound of fear. Before going inside, I looked back one last time at the quiet street of Willow Creek, the same place that once broke us. Now it glowed under the soft hum of porch lights and wind chimes. Let them remember, I whispered. Let every light here remind them that silence will never win again. Because some lights, no matter how much darkness tries, never go out.